welcome to my first ever YouTube video. In this video I'm going to finish off an old project. I kind of like the idea of finishing something and also starting something new at the same time, starting a YouTube channel. And also I think it's quite relatable because many of us makers start something, they're excited about the project, they buy the supplies, but at some point the project gets abandoned for various reasons, and that's what happened with this project. I really liked the pattern, I loved the fabric, and I don't really know what got in the way of completing the project. I think it was partly because
the weather might have been changing, I think, well, season, so I couldn't have worn it even if I finished it at some point, but I don't really know.
It's all excuses. I don't think it's bad, actually. I think if it's our hobby, we should just do what we like and what makes us happy, and if a project does no longer make me feel excited, I don't feel the need to finish it immediately, because this is something that should give me joy. But still, I sort of like to finish it at some point, and now this point has come. Let me show you what it is. So this is it, my project in a box, the pattern. It's a Gertie pattern. I think many of you know her patterns. I really like them. And in this box, there is all the material I need to finish this dress. I hope. It's not sponsored, by the way, I just like the box. And I like to recycle stuff, so... Well, okay, so let's see what we have here. A zipper. A metal one, actually, I think. Oh, that's nice. Didn't remember that. Then I have, I think, a lining fabric, probably. This was my mock-up, I remember that quite well. Because I remember doing a mock-up, I think might have been my first ever mock-up. It got changed quite significantly, actually, as you may be able to see. Got a little hole here. And this is my lovely, lovely fabric. Which makes me even more curious about why I abandoned this project, because it's so lovely. I bought it about 2 years ago. I think it's kind of vintage, but not really vintage. I think it's maybe from the 90s or something. I'm not really sure because I couldn't find the listing anymore on Etsy, so I couldn't tell you. But there was a limited amount of this fabric, only 2 yards, which if you're familiar with this pattern, you know it's not enough. But I did it anyway. Then this is, I think, the front bodice. I love the fact that this actually matched this geometrical pattern perfectly. This is interesting. Seems to be the bodice back. More fabric. I think part of it is skirts. Pockets, I presume? No. What? No, pockets. Pockets are very important. So I'm glad past me thought of making pockets. And I also have thread, matching thread actually. So it's all in this box, and I can't wait to start this project again and take you with me on this sewing journey. As I mentioned, I didn't have enough fabric to make the original pattern, so the skirt will be quite different. There won't be any box pleating in that kind of way, because I just couldn't have managed with 2 yards. But I really like the pleating because I know I've already done it. You can see it here. I have the pleats in place here, and they're still in there, so that shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, so I'm super excited to start working on this. Let's go. Here you can see all the previously cut fashion fabric pieces. At this point I realized that there were no cut lining or interlining pieces. Thus I went ahead to get everything ready for sewing. I cut out the missing pieces, transferred all the markings and sewed the missing dots. In order to stabilize the bodice neckline, the pattern suggests iron-on interfacing, which I attached to the lining, not the fashion fabric, in order to avoid a noticeable line on the outside of the dress. This was one of many useful tips from Gertie's Sew Along, which is available on her website. In my opinion, the Sew Along instructions are not only better, but also much more easily understandable than the instructions on the pattern itself. So, especially if you sew this dress as a beginner, checking out Gertie's Sew Along blog posts is certainly a great idea. I will link them down below. After attaching the interfacing to the neckline, I also added interfacing to the center of the back bodice pieces in order to support the zipper later on. I have now all my pieces ready. This is the fashion fabric, so I have my bodice. This is basically almost as it was beforehand, if I remember correctly. Then I have my back pieces with darts and interfacing, fusible interfacing for the zipper. Another one of these. Then I also have everything in lining. So now it's time to assemble the bodice. The first thing I did when assembling the bodice was sewing the front and back pieces together at the shoulder seams. I did this for both the lining and the fashion fabric. Then, as you can see here, I pinned and sewed the lining and fashion fabric layers together around the neckline. I graded the seam allowances down to about 8 and 5 mm respectively in order to avoid bulk, and clipped the curved edges. Now onto the little cutout on the front bodice. The chevron in the center front is the focal point of this dress, in my opinion, and thus has to be perfect. I wasn't quite content with my first try, so I tried again until I was happy with it. Or maybe I should say sort of happy, because as you will see, this cutout continued to bother me in another way. I understitched the entire seam, which means I basically sewed the seam allowance down onto the lining. This helps to get nice clean edges, as the lining wants to stay on the inside of the dress after it has been understitched. So I have now arrived at a problem, so to speak. It's maybe not a real problem, more of an issue I have with this pattern, or maybe with my fabric. This cutout, it's a little floppy. If I wear it and I stretch my arms, then it goes a little bit like this. If it's stretched like this over the bust, then it does this. I'm not sure whether I should have used a stronger interfacing, because I just used a really regular interfacing, but now I came up with an idea. So let me show you. I came up with the idea of inserting boning here and here in sort of a triangular shape, and I tried that out. Let me show you. It will go in like that, and the other one is like the mirror, and it's better, but it's still a little bit floppy, and I think I will try to put 2 holes in here and then sort of bind them together. I don't know whether that's whether that will work. It's maybe a bit experimental, but I'm not really happy with those floppy ends. I have a dress already that I bought and that has these floppy ends as well, and I am very annoyed at it for having those floppy points. So I hope to make it better myself, and let's see how it turns out. I ended up using quilt tape instead, which worked much better for my purpose, as it did not fray as much as the other tape. As you can see, I have now sewn the boning channels and inserted the boning. It was quite tricky to do, and I'm not sure whether I would recommend it to anyone, to be honest, but I'm quite happy with the effect. So you can see it is now quite stabilized, no longer as flimsy as it used to be, and I also sewed it together down here using the little holes that were drilled into the boning. It looks like that now from the inside. And yeah, I'm quite happy with it. So let's get this bodice sewn together. I continued by sewing the lining and fashion fabric together around the arm's eye on each side. I trimmed the seam allowances and turned the bodice inside out through the shoulder straps, so to speak. You can see it here if you don't understand what I mean by that. By the way, I really like this step. It always feels a little bit like magic when things are turned inside out in sewing projects. After this lovely step, the seam is understitched as far as possible. At this point, it was relatively late at night, and I just wanted to quickly finish the bodice by sewing the side seams together. Somehow, don't ask me how, I managed to pin and sew the wrong sides together, and I had to unpick everything. Oh well, at least I could laugh about my own silly mistake, and on the second attempt, I actually managed to sew the correct pieces together. By the way, the fabric and lining are not folded but kept apart when sewing the side seams. This allows for a perfectly nice finish with no visible seam allowances on the inside of the bodice. Then it was time to tackle the skirt. I overlocked the skirt panels all around, except for the top, and all around the pockets too. Then I attached the pockets to the skirt panels separately and ironed them away from the skirt. By the way, ironing is very important, and I always iron my seams, even if I have not shown or mentioned it here. Then I sewed the side skirt panels together, sewing all around the pockets and clipping the little edge between pocket and skirt. I continued by sewing the skirt's back seam up to where the zipper would take over later on. As you can see, this part of the back panels had also previously been reinforced by interfacing. Then it was time to drape the pleats on the dressing form. As I was lacking quite a lot of fabric, I had to improvise the step, but I actually liked the result at least as much, if not more, than regular box pleats. Also, the visual center of the front panel was not actually in the middle of the front panel, a fact which I had conveniently forgotten about. However, I really wanted the chevrons from the bodice and skirt to point towards each other. Of course, I could have shortened the wider side of the front skirt panel, but the side seams were already done and the pockets inserted, so I decided to use the pleats to hide the slight asymmetry. Even though I am a perfectionist, this little difference from left to right doesn't actually bother me at all. Probably no one would notice it unless I tell them or they watch this video. And hey, at least this project was super economical in its use of fabric, right? What I was very precise about, on the other hand, was the matching of pleats and bodice seams, as well as the matching of the aforementioned chevrons in the center front. I sewed the bodice to the dress, and after a little bit of unpicking and resewing, I was finally happy with it. I basted the zipper in place and tried the dress on, and alas, it was a bit too big. Thus, I had to do some small alterations and put the zipper in multiple times. Yay, fun! Who else loves sewing in zippers? Finally, there was the very satisfying process of finishing the inside of the dress by hand, with little felling stitches. I love hand sewing, I really do, but I was quite stressed at this point because I had planned to take pictures and videos of the dress in the evening, and I knew that I would only have sunlight left for a limited amount of time. Thus, I tacked a lining to the seam allowances at several points and wore the dress like this, as it made absolutely no difference from the outside. And don't worry, the inside got finished off very nicely later on, as you can see here. And now for the reveal. This is it, my cute little vintage-inspired floral dress. I am very pleased with it. It is super comfy to wear and it has that happy summer vibe to it. And it has pockets! What I would like to improve upon if I ever happen to use this pattern again is the bust area. I trusted my old mock-up and I think I could make the bodice fit better if I gave it a new try. What I like best is how I pleated the skirt and how pretty the border print looks. Also, I am retrospectively quite proud of how I fixed the floppy cutout area. I hope you enjoyed watching me create this dress, and maybe it has inspired you to try out this pattern or to complete an unfinished sewing project. Let me know in the comments if this is the case. I would love to know what you are making. Also, if you would like to follow me on further sewing and fashion history adventures, feel free to subscribe. And of course, I would appreciate a like and or some feedback on my first ever YouTube video in the comments below. Thank you, take care, and see you soon!